guys? It's so good to be back. It is Monday, January the 10th. Had a good weekend. And hopping into today's episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about my backstory and how Wild Eyed Creative Co. Came to be. So this is going to be a little bit of a longer one. There's kind of a lot to cover. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So back in 2012, my wife and I got married. And this was right after college. And so I had gotten a job at a local news station doing like these little rinky-dink 30-second commercials for local companies. And the way that that came about actually was way back in like 2006, 2005, 2006. My buddy Ryan Stark and I used to go to this Christian music festival called Cornerstone Festival in Bushnell, Illinois. And Ryan at the time had some cameras. And Ryan's bright idea, which worked, was we would take these cameras and we would be photographers so we could get on stage or, you know, maybe backstage with our favorite bands. And it worked a couple of times. And the times that it didn't, we still got to go like front row and shoot and take pictures of the bands. And that's really where I caught the bug for photography and shooting and that kind of stuff. And it just kind of grew from there. And then from there, I went to college, got a degree in digital media. So I got to do photography, video, graphic design, web design, all of that stuff. It was a very kind of like umbrella type of degree. But my primary focus was actually studio audio. Like I wanted to record bands in the studio. Because even prior to shooting and all of that, like music was going to be my thing. Like I've been doing music ever since I was a kid. I love music. I play guitar. I'm the worship leader at my church. So music has always been integral to like who I am. But as I started to get a little bit older, I realized like I want to get married and have a wife and all that stuff. And that's really, really hard to do if you're living the rock star lifestyle. So picking up photography and doing those kinds of things was a way for me to kind of scratch that musical itch. So I could still do something creative, but not have to be on the road and living that life. So went to Greenville Christian College, now Greenville University. It's in Southern Illinois. Graduated from there. And right when I graduated from there is when I got that job at the news station, making those commercials. And then not too long after that is when Katie and I got married. Now, I'd worked that commercial job for, I'm going to say about a year, maybe a little over. And then I had a really cool opportunity to go work at a church doing content creation and marketing and things for them. So I left the TV station job to go work at this church. And that lasted all of like 5 minutes. I think I was seriously there for like 3 months. And it was weird because like I had my own church that I did this stuff at, and now I was working for another church, and it just kind of ended up being like this weird thing. So I was there for like 3 months, and then I just got let go because I didn't want to become a part of that church because I had my own church. And so it was just kind of like a weird circumstance. So when I got let go from that job, I kind of felt like, man, I had the skills that I needed to potentially launch my own photography business. And so that's what I decided to do. So not too long after getting let go, I really, really hopped into like the business side of things, like how to do pricing, how to run a business, how to do all that kind of stuff. And really just hopped into that, started, bugging all of my friends and like taking them out on shoots to try to build a bigger portfolio and that kind of stuff. And so for me, like that's where my love for photography and like my passion for a business really started. And so I did that for, like a few months. Sorry, there's a lot to this story, so I had to like write down notes so I didn't forget anything because timelines for me are rough. So we did that for a few months, and then we ended up moving. So 2014 rolls around, and my wife and I end up moving out here to Utah. We had some friends here at the time, and we had visited them and like loved it. It was a great experience. We loved the area. So we decided to move out here about a year later, which ended up being in like 2014. And so I was still kind of doing the photography stuff, but the friends that we moved out here to kind of be with and hang out with in the church that we joined, there was a lot of musicians. I was like, hey, this might be an opportunity to like do music again, and be able to do it in a way that like works. So we really like, I really dove into the music stuff again, and that was a lot of fun. But it really just got to a point again where we're like, the music was starting to take over. My marriage kind of took a back seat for a little bit because I was pursuing all of these different things with church and music and all of that stuff. And so my priorities got like super duper out of whack. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I can't really do that anymore. I wasn't willing to do that. I remembered why I kind of quit music in the first place, and why I got the degree that I did and did the things that I did was so that I could be married and have a wife and still be creative and have my own business. And so I decided to quit doing music again. And then I decided to relaunch my photo business here in Utah. And that was kind of interesting because even though I did really only had it kind of up and running for a little while, comparatively speaking, in Illinois, in Illinois, I could charge a couple grand for a wedding, even just starting off. Like that wasn't really that difficult. But moving here to Utah, like that ended up being like super duper difficult. Like I ended up having to like drop my prices, and it was really, 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 really rough when we first moved to Utah. And so getting my photography business where I needed it to be. And so like I kind of got to a point where like I felt like I failed. And like I struggled for a couple of years, and it just kind of got to a point I'm like, man, what am I doing? Like this is ridiculous. And so like for me, like I really felt like I failed, like hardcore failed. And like I went through this phase of like really, really deep depression. It was like the first time I'd ever really dealt with anything like this before. And like just wouldn't get out of bed for days. Like it was rough. Like I sank into a really, really deep depression. And that lasted for quite a while. Like that put a strain on our marriage. And it had lasted for a while. And like, I think the worst part was that for the longest time, I wasn't willing to get help. I maybe it's because I grew up in Illinois. Maybe it's because I was just like good old Midwestern boy or what. But for the longest time, I was like very against like medication and counseling. And, I had a very ignorant, narrow view of those things. And so, but after dealing with the depression and the anxiety and just the things that was causing and just the way that life was going at that time, I was like, I've got to get some kind of help because I can't keep doing the things that I was doing. So got some help, started going to counseling, got on some medication. And that could be its like own whole story because the medication didn't go well for me. Like I tried several different combinations of Vyvanse and Lexapro and Adderall and just all of this stuff. And like, it was bad news. And so really what ended up working for me was the counseling side of things. And I still do that today. And, so that was kind of my journey at that point. But from there, kind of getting leveled back out and then finding a couple different jobs here and there. I worked for a college and did phone calls, worked in the call center. That was really interesting. And then I got a job working at a hospital at like the check-in desk, which was also super interesting. And then had an opportunity to go work for a photographer and some realtors, helping run a studio and then doing some marketing. And that was a lot of fun. That was really, really cool. But after a while, again, it was just kind of like, I just wasn't really cut out for doing that kind of stuff. And so unfortunately that ended up falling apart. And then not too long after that, I actually ended up finding a marketing job for a local company. And for the first time in a while, like it was something that I felt like I could sink my teeth into. So I was working the marketing job and doing photography at the same time. And then when Riley, my daughter, was born, it kind of got down to this point where like I was doing my marketing job and we would do, for the marketing jobs, we would have like these trade shows in Vegas and It kept me relatively busy. And then when I wasn't busy with that, I was shooting weddings on the weekends. And for like the first year of my daughter's life, like I wasn't really around much. Like I was just working all of the time, and I hated that. I remember growing up, my parents, they both worked and they were both pretty busy. And I just remember like growing up, I always thought to myself, like, I want to make sure that when my kids are the age that I was back then, that I could have all of the time that I needed to be with them and do the things that they wanted to do, and that I was also in good enough physical health to be able to do that as well. I was a pretty active kid. I wore my dad out for sure, and I just remember like the big drive for me to have my own business was so that I could have time for my kids and to be healthy, and so we could do all of those things. And so working that marketing job and doing the photography on the side, like again, I wasn't really around for like the first year of my daughter's life. And like, again, it had kind of gotten to this point where like my priorities were out of whack. My marriage had taken a backseat again. And it was just, it was rough, right? It was really frustrating. And I think the funny thing is like, I got to a point where I was just like, all right, like I'm gonna do the smart, responsible thing, right? I'm gonna just give up on photography. I'm done trying to do my own business. I'm just going to double down on this marketing job and just, I'm just gonna do the thing, right? I'm gonna do the responsible thing. And I remember having that conversation with my wife, and I'd even started selling off gear and all that kind of stuff. And within 3 weeks, I think like 3 to 4 weeks of making that decision, of like, all right, I'm going all in on my marketing job. I'm done with photography. Like I need to be a responsible adult. Within like 3, maybe 4 weeks of making that decision, like I ended up getting let go from that job, which was really interesting because like I kind of saw it coming, I think, because it had really turned from like a marketing, like content creation marketing type job to more of a data management type thing, which was just totally out of my league. They knew it. I knew it. Like I tried to do it anyway, but it just got to a point where like it wasn't working for them and it wasn't working for me. And so they were just like, yeah, this isn't working. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And so they were super gracious. Like they were so nice about it. Like give me a really, really big severance. And, like, again, it was definitely, it was an amicable thing. And it was just really interesting that I'd made the decision to go all in on that. And, within 3 to 4 weeks, that job that I decided to go all in on didn't exist anymore. And so I was left kind of like in this position, like, fuck, like what am I going to do? I've got a wife and a kid at home. I've got no money. I've got no job. I have all of these skills. But like, oh man, like I was in a tailspin, like hardcore tailspin. And so I went and talked to my buddy Dan, Pastor Dan, and he gave me some advice that was really, really interesting because, just where like I grew up, the kinds of people that I grew up around is very pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality and no excuses and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of what I was expecting to come out of this conversation that I had with Pastor Dan. And so so I went and talked to him, and he's like, I want you to take some time. And he's like, they give you a severance. I'm like, yeah, a really good one. He's like, I want you to take 4 weeks. He's like, I don't want you to do anything. I'm like, what? like nothing? He's like, no. He's like, basically, I want you to take a vacation for 4 weeks. I'm like, what? Dude, no. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I was internally freaking out. And he's like, the reason I want you to do that is because like, it's like, I want you to get your head on straight. He's like, if you just, run straight to Home Depot, or, grab something to get you by, you're going to get stuck in this cycle. And he's like, I don't want you to get stuck in this panic cycle that just leads you from one bad decision or from one thing to another that's not really what God has for you, kind of thing. I was like, all right, man. So I took 4 weeks and I didn't do anything. Like I just hung out around the house and spent time with the family and went to church and stuff. And at the end of that 4 weeks, like it was decision time. And so I started thinking to myself, I was like, man, should I pick the photography back up? Like, should I do that? Or, should I go to Home Depot? Should I try to find another job? And so I started making a list. I was like, all right, here's all of the skills I have. Here's everything that I can do. Here's what I'm good at. Here's what I'm like okay at. And within that list of skills was web design. Again, it was something I had done in college. I built my photography website on Squarespace. And so it's like that kind of interested me. I was like, I can do that. It's a learning curve. I would still have a lot to learn to really be able to do it for a business. But I was like, I think I could do that. So I started reaching out to all my photography contacts, the vendors that I had met. And I was just like, what's the website situation look like for photographers? Like, is that something you guys do? Is it something you guys hire out? Like, how important is it to you? And I was met with this resounding, like, oh my gosh, I need so much help with my website. Like, here's the issues that I'm having. I've hired people to do X, Y, and Z, and it didn't work, and all this kind of stuff. And so it's just like, oh, so like, there's a real need for this. And so I gave myself another 4 weeks. I was like, okay, I'm going to do a couple websites for free, just so I have something for a portfolio. But if I can match my marketing job income with building websites for photographers, I'll give myself 4 weeks. And if I can do that, then I'll keep pushing forward. And I really just kind of took it 4 weeks at a time. It was like super duper scary. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of my wife. She's had a good job this whole time. She's got the insurance through her job and stuff like that. And so like without her, like this definitely wouldn't have been possible the way that I did it. And I definitely don't recommend anybody do things the way that I did it, because my circumstance was super duper weird. But I just kind of took it 4 weeks at a time, and I got like 3 or 4 months into, was it 2018? Yeah, we're going on 4 years. Yeah. So like 2018, and I was like, man, I think I've got something. Like, I think I've got like a legitimate business. Like, I was making more than I did at my marketing job. And, I had time. Like, I was able to start taking my daughter to daycare and picking her up from daycare, getting back in the gym. I was just like, oh man, like this is everything. This is what I wanted. And so once I got like 3 or 4 months into it, I'm like, okay, like we're going to do this. Like, we're really going to do it. And so that's where, Wild Eyed was really born. And one of I think the big things for me at that point too, was that like, growing up pretty conservative and pretty traditional, and like I still hold all of those values, but like I was very different growing up. Like, my graduating class was like 42 kids. Like, it was a really small, like kind of farming town school, and I didn't really fit in with that. Like, I was a super weird kid. Like, any of my old classmates from grade school and high school can attest to this. Like, I was a super duper weird kid. But yeah, like I didn't fit in, and I always wanted to do something different. Like, I never wanted to do the 9 to 5. I wanted to do music. I wanted to live, that lifestyle. So I never really fit the mold for, I guess, like your average American. But for me, like I've always kind of viewed life like with this wild, spontaneous, and maybe it's my ADHD. I don't know. Like, it very well could be, but like for me, I'm very spontaneous. And so I've always kind of had what I've considered like this wild-eyed, feral view of just like, I don't care if they've done it this way for 20 years. Like, I'm going to do it my own way. And so for me, like that is where Wild Eyed was born. Like this very wide, wild-eyed view, this feral kind of like wild take on like, this is how I want to do things, and this is the way that I'm going to do them. And yeah, it's been 4 years now that we've been doing this. There's been a lot of growth, a lot of changes. I've had a lot of wins, but I've also had a lot of failures. But like, being able to learn from those and then implement them and fix them, and then really, for me, like, I think like the ethos or like the purpose of like what Wild Eyed is beyond just websites is like helping other people um, experience that as well. Like I just remember like how scared and how frustrated and pissed off and just everything that you can imagine that I was trying to grow a photography business and failing so many times and causing so many problems and trying to like balance a family with that and trying to take the safe approach with working the 9 to 5 and having that blow up in my face. And then just getting to a point where like I have to go for broke, right? As my business coach, Jai Long would say, I had to make my break. Like there was no other option. And so I want other people to experience, the victories of what I've had, because I know a lot of you guys are maybe in some part of that story where you're trying to get to full time, or you're trying to like figure out how to make this work so you can get that time or that peace back into your own personal life and maybe with your family. And I definitely don't have all the answers. I know what worked for me. But like, I think the real reason behind like the websites for me is like, it's an avenue for me to be able to share this story and then like help people find ways to get to the other side, to jump those hurdles and jump that canyon and climb those mountains and find their mountaintop of success with their photography businesses, and then hopefully also like in their personal life. Like when you find a way to run your business the right way for you, I don't think that there's necessarily any hard and fast rules. Like you gotta figure out what works for you. But when we figure that out and we get you a website and branding that speaks to the right people, so you can start to really build a business that serves your ideal client and you, man, the freedom to have more time and to be a better parent or a better spouse, man, that it just for me it just naturally flowed out of that. And there are still times, when we make pivots and stuff, that I'm working 14 to 16 hour days and my family doesn't see me for weeks at a time. But like the freedom and the joy that I've been able to experience by having my own business is something that like I so desperately want for other people. And so doing websites and branding is a way for me to help people achieve that. So anyway, guys, we're going on 20, 24, 25 minutes. So I know that's been a lot. There's a lot to this story. But yeah, that's how Wild I was born. And that's where I'm going to leave this episode. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about where you are, some of the struggles that you've had, if you've had some similar ones as myself. So drop those in the comments below. And yeah, we'll see you guys next Monday. Thanks.